You know how people play Saren when they want to do that, right? Well, imagine if Saren had infinite energy generation, massive crowd control and damage multiplication, free toxin damage on your weapons, so much HP, status immunity, the list goes on and on. Oh yeah, she's also a spider by the way, with her own army of mini spiders, and she can grapple to walls where she will then turn invisible. Araxia is probably going... No, she is going to break the game. In fact, she already has. Warframe's brand new update Isle Weaver has just released, and there is a hell of a lot of content to cover here. But Araxia was really the main draw for me because her ability previews and just her general theme seemed really cool, and also super strong, which I am happy to say she is, and it is reflected in her gameplay very well. This Warframe is ridiculous and has more things in one ability than some Warframes have in their entire kit. So let me show you. Her first ability, Mercy's Kiss, is a dual function tool in my opinion. Casting will have you jump very quickly towards an enemy where you will strike them with her spider legs, dealing toxin damage, which is a theme you will find consistent throughout her entire kit. To no one's surprise, the spider Warframe deals toxin damage, obviously. I don't mean to say that as a bad thing though. Toxin is a really great status for many reasons. It ignores enemy shields, which means Corpus will fall over even quicker than they normally do, while its status effect of poison is one of the better dots in the game because it will scale off toxin mod damage, unlike other statuses like Blast. Back to Mercy's Kiss though. The range on this ability is quite extreme, which allows you to cross entire tiles by looking at a faraway enemy and then casting, if you have modded on even just a little bit, with the crazy base stat of 40 meters. Though what you're more likely to actually use this ability for is energy generation through its on-kill effect. When enemies are below 50% HP, a marker will appear above their head, meaning that stabbing them will now insta-kill them, which has a lot of useful applications, but it also grants them a quote-unquote chance to drop health and energy orbs. I emphasize the chance because it isn't really a chance at 200% for a health orb and 50% for an energy orb, meaning a simple 200% strength build, which is way lower than what you actually want to build her for, will spawn you 4 health orbs and 1 energy orb, which with equilibrium equates to around 250 energy per kill, meaning that low efficiency on Araxia is easier to run than you would expect. Moving on to Webbed Embrace, as you could guess, this ability will have Araxia throw, and I mean throw, a creeping web to ensnare enemies. Crowd control vulnerable enemies, which are everything but units with overguard or bosses, minus a few exceptions, will take a little bit of toxin damage, but more importantly, be entirely immobilized and unable to shoot you, while taking 50% more damage that does scale with strength. With a very high base duration, this is a really great CC ability, but it does fall into the usual problems similar abilities have, because Warframe as a whole doesn't really need crowd control, especially not on Araxia with her later abilities. The damage she does and the AoE that she grants is so extreme that dealing 50 or even 150% more damage to webbed enemies is just not needed, and there really is no reason to web them in the first place because she can spam invis or health tank better than most. So this one is definitely going to be the helmet slot for any builds you see, I am guessing. It's not a bad ability inherently, it does what is advertised very well, but we just don't require it these days. What is very cool and strong though, is Widow's Brood, her summoner ability. If the spider frame couldn't make an army of mini spiders, I think we'd all be pretty mad, but fortunately for us, she does. Firing a barrage of stinging darts in front of her, these will auto-target any enemies within a 35-degree cone and within your range, dealing toxin damage and triggering the status expectedly, while on kill, poisoned enemies will spawn a scuttler, i.e. a mini spider. These scuttlers act like any other summon companion in the game, running around damaging enemies, doing their thing, but unlike certain other summons, they actually deal a ton of damage. Considering that they trigger toxin on every hit, what is probably the best mod for Araxia actually will get some use now, almost 2 years after its release, Archon Continuity. This mod causes abilities that apply toxin statuses to also apply corrosive at a 1-to-1 ratio, which might as well make this Araxia the mod. Seeing as scuttlers are ability summons, this means they will be passively armor stripping enemies as they damage them, which will greatly boost both our damage and theirs. You can have 10 of these guys active at once. They're 45-second base duration, meaning with only 128%, they last over a minute. Do note that you can see your current number of active spiders on the ability icon down here. Lastly, and most importantly, there is Silken Stride, which is the apex ability of her kit for just everything that it does. What is immediately apparent on casting is that Araxia's spider legs are now her main form of mobility, which is honestly really cool. One thing I would recommend is to run any sort of sprint speed bonuses from things like Praetos or Rush in her Exilis, because you might feel a little slow when just walking around. But don't worry, you aren't going to be spending too much time on the ground, because even though you can still slide, rolling is replaced with what I would call a mix between web swinging like Spider-Man and a grappling hook. Pressing your dodge key while looking at any surface will very rapidly pull Araxia towards it, where she will then wall latch, which interacts wonderfully with her passive that grants her 8 seconds of uninterruptible invisibility on every wall latch. While you cannot walk on these surfaces with her spider legs, the webbing around is really fast, and there is some cool tech you can use here to kind of slingshot yourself around maps. If you grapple to a faraway spot, which isn't hard because the base range here is 75 meters, that does scale, you can cancel it midair with a jump and send yourself flying. But if you want to halt momentum, you can hold down your backwards input and then jump, and come out of the grapple without continuing to fly forward. The possibilities here are quite endless. Besides the spider movement, Araxia gains many other benefits, starting with a double to her HP that, you guessed it, scales with strength. At 675 base HP, this means on our build later, Araxia will have 3,456 HP, which is ridiculous. Damage-wise though, and here's where things really go crazy, Araxia will gain a toxin damage weapon infusion of 75% that is doubled while you are wall latched. This toxin damage weapon infusion is pretty much Toxic Lash from Saren, so much so that while I haven't done extensive testing, they look and might as well be the same thing. Now when you shoot your guns, you will have an extra hit of pure toxin damage that scales in wildly strong ways. Firstly, faction damage of any kind will apply to your weapons damage and then multiply the added hit again, and then multiply the resulting toxin dot a third time for a triple dip. Paired with toxin mods on your weapons also applying their own multiplier on this damage regardless of if they are combined into other elements, and it makes Araxia into one of the best weapon platforms in the game, no doubt about that. There is one synergy in particular though that really does break the game, more on that later. Past the toxin infusion though, killing enemies now causes them to explode for even more AoE toxin damage, which will make any single target weapon into an AoE one, and seeing as this force procs toxin, it will trigger Archon continuity for a free accompanying corrosive proc. The reason that you don't trigger corrosive just by shooting is because the toxin damage infusion isn't considered ability damage because it stems from shooting your gun, though the on-death explosion is, which is why it obviously applies there. What this entire kit now presents us with is a high HP, invisible, damage multiplying, army summoning, infinite energy generating, AoE nuking Warframe that can Spider-Man grapple around the map. I don't even know what to say, but wow. DE is on such a streak these days, it is actually insane. So what should you use on Araxia though? Well, if you're interested at all in the background gameplays build, it will make use of the Sobek with its mod Acid Shells, which I happened to have just made an entire video on, going over how it works and what Warframes it is best on. Add Araxia to that list. If you want the extensive details, go watch that video, but for clarity, killing enemies with Sobek and the Acid Shells mod on will cause an explosion of corrosive damage and 45% of an enemy's HP in a 15-meter radius. For reasons, the percent HP is not all that strong, but because Silken Stride's extra toxin damage applies to every attack coming from a weapon, the explosion is treated no differently, and kills will now spread a very buff toxin dot to every enemy within its 15-meter range. The tile set nuking you see is because Acid Shell's own kills will re-trigger it, and remember that Araxia is already adding an explosion on death, so now you have two, which multiplies damage in groups by an order of magnitude way higher than someone like Saren can do. On the Sobek, here is what we use. It is built entirely around buffing our toxin damage as high as possible, so much so that this will still nuke at level cap, which is insane. Over on Araxia, Archon shards first, 1 casting and then 2+ toxin status damage shards is what I use. The casting is for comfort, but the toxin damage shards are really strong here as they are additive with things like Elementalist, which is a separate status damage multiplier and it buffs our toxin dots like crazy. The Araxia build looks like this. I would love to put Roar over her second ability, but her fourth is counted as a damage buff, so it is incompatible with others marked the same. Strength wants to be pushed as high as possible, as you can see. To answer some questions you may have, Energy Conversion's 50% strength bonus is really easy to use because we can force spawn an energy orb with her 1, pick it up, and then enter her fourth ability, which is a channeled ability, so we don't deactivate it, meaning we will snapshot to 50% and continue to benefit from it as long as we stay in spider mode. Arcane-wise, you may be tempted to use Bellicose, but the ability you want to benefit it with, her fourth, is what gives you the extra HP, and there's no way to snapshot it and then use her fourth, so it's ultimately not that useful. Still though, Kamisato provides a faster growing 60% strength than Augmented, and 20% more movement speed on top, which she really appreciates. This slot is open for pretty much anything you want. The Sobek build in particular does not benefit from the crit damage increase that Crepuscular gives, but Arachne works well and is thematically fitting. It is your choice. Your companion is also open to you. If you want a summoner setup, swap over to this config which has Summoner's Wrath and Theorem Infection, alongside higher duration for the Scuttlers. This build does require you to pair it with a kick gun that has residual boils on it to scale the damage on infection, but that isn't really a problem because Araxia will make them stupid strong, so don't worry about it. That is Araxia. What a goddamn Warframe, y'all. I can't wait to dive deeper into her kit and create even more broken builds with some helmet abilities for y'all. Very, very exciting. I'll have some shorts coming out very soon covering the new Warframe augments and a video on the new Incarnate Scythe later today. See y'all soon. Peace.